So welcome, David Grand. It's so lovely to see you again.
Thank you, Mark. It's great to see you as well.
Really lovely to see you. And each time I spend time with you, I learn so much. And it was such a pleasure to have you over in London in February to do the phase 3 brain spotting training.
It was for me as well.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's really exciting. A really exciting time. I had some great feedback from there. And the wonderful news is, hot off the press, is you're coming back in November 2020 to teach the brain spotters here and overseas the masterclass in London.
Mm-hmm.
So my main question is, for all the people watching this, is what is a brain spotting masterclass?
Okay. Well, I'll say right off the bat that some people get confused because we have phase 3 and now phase 4, which I'll bring over to UK, probably a year after the masterclass, is to think that if there's a number attached to it, like you have phase 1 and phase 2, then you should go for phase 3, and then phase 4. And like the concept of where the masterclass fits in, because of its lack of a number, can be a bit confusing. I like to say that the masterclass is the most important class for brain spotting therapists to take after they've trained in brain spotting, phase 1 and phase 2. It is, if someone has just taken phase 1 and they haven't had a chance to take phase 2, they can come to the masterclass, because this is to help you to increase your mastery in doing brain spotting. But what it really is a chance to see how I do brain spotting in my office. In the masterclass, we don't have demonstrations like we have in phase 1 or phase 2, where we're there to demonstrate a specific brain spotting technique, such as inside window, outside window, one-eye brain spotting, z-axis, where the demonstration has to show that, so that it's sort of more narrow in its focus. What we have in the masterclass are what we call experientials, where it's not there to demonstrate anything. It's there to just show the experience of a full-blown, integrative, innovative, in-the-moment brain spotting session. So that's why we call it the masterclass, because it's showing not only the mastery of brain spotting, but mastery of the clinical process of brain spotting. The relational, the interactive, extended setup processes, a whole variety of things, from front loading, where we show how you give information to the neocortex before you start the session, so that once you go into the session, you don't have to worry about any of this. You can just stay in the tail of the comet and follow the client wherever they go. And also backloading, which is how you give information towards the end of the session, or in the debrief of the session. So here we're actually showing, in addition to how you bypass the neocortex, we're showing how and when you engage the neocortex. And you can't do that in any of the demonstrations in the other trainings. But what we always say in brain spotting is we're waiting for the surprise. And here in the experientials, we are definitely waiting for the surprise. And when the surprise comes, we just sort of go with it. And usually there's more than one surprise in a session. And the surprise is really when something turns, when there's just a healing moment that you can't anticipate, you can't manufacture. But when it happens, you know it. And then you hold a frame around it and follow it. You ride it, to maximize the healing. This is the masterclass is the training for the clinical expertise of the brain spotting therapists in doing brain spotting. We talk about brain spotting as bringing together or marrying the neuroscience with the clinical science. And it's not only that neuroscience informs clinical science, it's that clinical science informs neuroscience. And here you get to see it in real time.
I see. So, having moved on from trainings where you're teaching techniques, in a sense, like you were saying, and having to stick within that to a certain extent, there's much more liberation, as we would have in our offices, where you can completely go comet in the tail and follow the process wherever it needs to go without any restrictions.
People will always say, well, when do you use this, or how do you use that, when we teach the basic techniques? Here we show it. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
And we can put, and the brain spotting techniques are not made to be used by themselves. They're made to be used together. We have this wonderful toolkit that has all these tools, but it's not just a matter of, do I choose this tool or do I choose this tool? It's how I choose, how and when I choose the tools I do, and how and when I use them together, which can never be shown in any of the trainings, but that's what the masterclass is designed for.
I see, yeah. And the way you describe that, it reminds me of a question that often comes up, not just in brain spotting, I think with any trauma informed training, is how do you resource? How do you resource? How do you resource? Because, you know, clearly we're always working in attunement and getting that balance of being able to process whilst keeping the client within a window of tolerance. And this is very important in brain spotting. In the masterclass, do you have more capacity to do that, to be able to have those layers of resourcing?
Well, because the focus in the masterclass is the therapeutic relationship. Remember, the dual attunement frame is just a way of forming a holding environment relationship with a client.
Yeah.
The ultimate resource in any psychotherapy, but very much so in brain spotting, is the relationship.
Yeah.
And any additional resources that are brought to bear are only as effective as the resource of the relationship itself. So this is really what we get to show. And I have to add that after every experiential, and we have 6 of them, 2 every day. After every experiential, we have an incredibly extensive debrief. It starts with a personal debrief, so the person who was the client is really just sort of connected with around the profundity of their experience. Then we have the technical debrief, and that's where we can go into all of these details. And the question of why did I use this at this time? Why didn't I use this? Gives me a chance to articulate the actual resources that are there all the way through the process. Remember, brain spotting goes for the implicit over the explicit, which means the subcortical over the neocortical.
Right.
So most people think of resource work in the explicit. When this happens, you do this. Brain spotting, because we're looking for the implicit, we see the resource process as being primarily implicit and only explicit if and when necessary and as long as necessary. So we have a chance to show that. And you have 6 experientials. So when we do the second one or the third one and we debrief it, we compare each of the sessions to the prior session or the prior 2, 3, 5 sessions. And all these questions get a chance to be asked again and again and answered again and again in greater depth and greater complexity.
That sounds really nice. So this layer of layering in the understanding, the learning from the experiential, I suppose even if a brain spotter might have trained a while ago or not used it very much, maybe for one reason and another, it just, you know, it's taken a while to build a confidence or it's been hard to use in a certain service. Even if they're coming and feeling quite rusty to a masterclass, there'll still be a chance to revisit the core principles and the fundamentals, as well as the more advanced areas of brain spotting.
Every time I teach brain spotting, even at the most advanced levels, I reteach the basic fundamental aspects of it. And it's interesting, some people think, well, can I come? I only just took phase 1 2 months ago, so I'm just so new to brain spotting. I haven't used it with that many clients. Well, first of all, in practical terms, if I'm not going to be doing a masterclass in the UK for another 3 years, why should you have to wait? You know? But also, everybody who, when they take brain spotting, is already an experienced clinician or is already a clinician. So this is not a masterclass is not just a class in brain spotting. It's a class in the mastery of clinical work, using brain spotting's concepts and using brain spotting's tools. And if someone really is rusty or hasn't used it that much, it's probably because they don't have enough confidence in their ability to use it. What better way to build that confidence than to see 6 different sessions that are extensively debriefed and to be able to raise your hand and ask specific questions about any things that you have doubts about or any things you're unclear on. Now I want to add in one more thing because we have an additional learning piece in addition to the 6 experientials. I use a technique called role play supervision. which instead of a person coming up to me and presenting a case for supervision, where I sit there and then I ask them questions and then I guide them, why have you tried this? Might you try this? There's the old saying in show business, don't tell me, show me. Mm. So what we do is we enroll into the characters, and the person who's presenting, the therapist who's presenting their challenging brain spotting case, enrolls and becomes the client. And I enroll and become a therapist, and we have a role play session. That's why it's called role play supervision. And it's much more dynamic than just talking about things. You get to really see it in real terms. And actually, the person who plays the client always goes into character very fast. So it becomes almost like a two-person play, and one where you're actually taken in by the process, and where you also get the education as far as how I would handle this client if they were in my office. And oftentimes it's not what people expect. Oftentimes it's people think, well, then you got to set the frame and jump in and put up the pointer and get things rolling and just follow the process, which is core brain spotting. We know from the clinical process that you can't just go by the book, that you can't go by any preconceived notion, that you have to be in the moment with the client, following them wherever they go, and that the process evolves on its own. So in this role play supervision, we get to see that happening. But what's great for the audience is that the stakes are very low. It's not like the experientials where somebody's heart is on the line, and their suffering is right out there, and we get our own empathic response, but we also feel the tension of it. Here, it's not real. So all of that is off, and you get to see a session that's a play acted session, but really it ends up looking like a real session, which is quite fascinating. Wow. But nobody gets hurt, nobody suffers. And we debrief the role play supervision the same way that we debrief the experientials. So there's and sometimes actually the therapist who enrolled as the client actually needs some help to come out of character, because they go so deep into character, and it's really quite dynamic and fascinating. So the setup actually for each day in the masterclass is you start in the morning with an experiential. Right. And then after the experiential, can be in the morning or in the early afternoon, we have the first role play supervision. And then after that, in the afternoon, we have the second experiential. So every day there's two experientials sandwiched around a role play supervision, and all the three debriefs. And this is the same pattern we follow every day. So we end up having 6 experientials and three role play supervisions. And I would add to this. This is a place to ask any question. The masterclass is a place to ask any question you have about any aspect of brain spotting, even if it doesn't come up in any of what we do, in front of the class. So, we recommend write down your questions, and the more basic the question, the better a question it is, quite ironically, because they're not basic questions, they're not simple questions, they're fundamental questions.
Right, yes.
And with the fundamentals of brain spotting, from the uncertainty principle and the dual attunement frame and focused mindfulness and staying in the frame of the comet and the neurophysiological imperative, all of these things we have to learn and relearn and relearn. Sometimes in the phase 1 or the phase 2 or even the phase 3, there isn't enough time to go into that, because we have to learn these new techniques and we have a time frame for that. But in the master class, because it's all experiential, all role play, and the debrief is where everything gets paid off. In the debrief, these extensive debriefs, you can ask anything, even if it isn't germane to that exact experiential. I really think that I do the advanced courses to teach this, but I also do it so anybody in brain spotting around the world can study directly with me, and hear the words coming out of my mouth that come from my brain and goes into the students' ears and into their brains directly. But I really think the masterclass is the most important and the one that people should actually start with.
Yeah.
So don't think, oh, I missed the phase 3, that David taught, earlier in the year. So, I don't know if I can come to this. Think if you miss the phase 3, I have to go to this one, And if you took the phase 3, of course, you'll want to follow up with the masterclass because it's a totally different learning experience.
I really appreciate that. And I think there's so many ways to learn and relearn and consolidate, aren't there? And when each time I've watched you work, and I've been lucky enough to kind of go around the world, watching you work in wonderful places, wonderful settings with wonderful, so many wonderful cases. Sometimes when I felt I've understood a concept, something maybe that feels as basic initially as setting the frame, as I've kind of seen you work more intensively like you do in your office, it's started to take on a whole new shape for me, another dimension about what that actually means, setting the frame. And it moves from being a kind of a phrase into a whole really important part of the process in itself, just really learn that as I observe you more.
Well, the more we study everything in brain spotting, the more dimensional it gets. It goes from 2-dimensional to 3-dimensional to 4-dimensional to quantum dimensional. So the great thing about studying brain spotting is you never finish studying. It's something you study for the entirety of your entire professional career, even if you practice into your 80s.
Yeah. Well, that's lovely. And it reminds me of, I think, what Plato says about the soul. If you think you've understood it, you've misunderstood it. It's eternally, infinitely complex. And to embrace that is wonderfully liberating.
Well, we're not going to be foolhardy enough to question Plato.
Yeah. Thank you, David. That's really lovely. We've got a while till it comes. It's November the 6th, the 7th and the 8th in 2020. You're coming to London. Yeah. You can go to your main website, the brainspotting.com website, if people want to book through there. Or they can go through the BSP UK website to book through there. But just so excited. Thanks for taking this time just to give us a sense of what we've got to look forward to.
Well, thank you for hosting me and making this happen.
Oh, absolute pleasure, David. All the best to you and your family. And I look forward to seeing you before too long.
Same here.